Very often I'll tell my beginners classes that Tai Chi is kind of the great equalizer, right? It doesn't really matter what you have in your background.
Hello there, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, episode 590, with my guest today, Shifu Chris Himmel. I am Jeremy Lesniak. I'm your host here for the show, the founder of Whistlekick, and a really passionate. I love traditional martial arts, and that's why we do what we do over here at Whistlekick. All the things that we're doing, go to whistlekick.com, check out everything we've got going on. We've got links to our projects and our products. You're going to see stuff in our store at whistlekick.com that you can purchase to support us. And if you use the code podcast15, lets us know that you listen to the show and that we should keep putting money into the show and time and all the things that go into making this happen. The show itself has its own website, Whistlekick, martialartsradio.com. We release 2 brand new episodes each and every week with the goal of educating, entertaining, connecting traditional martial artists throughout the world. And I think we do a pretty good job of that. And if you think we do a pretty good job of that, well, maybe you'd be up for helping us out in some way, whether that's telling people about the show, sharing it on social media, going to class or on Zoom and saying, hey, guys, checking out the Whistlekick podcast. They do some pretty cool stuff. That Jeremy guy, he might not have much hair, but he really digs martial arts. Well, you could also sign up for our newsletter. There's a ton of stuff, but one that I want to highlight, our Patreon, patreon.com/whistlekick. What do we do with Patreon? It's a place that several times a month we are uploading exclusive content, exclusive audio, video. We dump book drafts in there. We give you behind the scenes on who's coming up on the show. It's the only place you're going to find out upcoming guests on the show. We don't tell you that stuff in the newsletter. We just tell you what we've done. You want to know what we're going to do? Check out the Patreon. And in fact, at $2 a month, you're going to find out what's going on behind the scenes. We do a lot for a little, and it's why very, very rarely does someone stop their Patreon contribution. To those of you who do contribute on Patreon, thank you, thank you, thank you. Your charity, I don't want to call it charity, your support, there we go, that's a better word, goes a long way to covering the expenses that go into doing all the things that we do. When we talk about all the different kinds of martial arts, if I was to ask you to make a list, it'd probably be a little while before you start writing down words like Tai Chi or Bagua. And yet for some martial artists, that's the top of their list. That's the stuff that they do, that they know most. And we don't get a lot of opportunity to talk to people who have ventured into these realms of other martial arts, less common martial arts, at least in Western society, especially when they started in something that we might think of as a more commonplace martial art. Well, Shifu Himmel is exactly that. And while we get a lot on his story, we spend a bunch of time talking about his transition into these other martial arts and some things that I think all of us can stand to remember in our training. I don't want to ruin anything or go any deeper, so let's just let it unfold. Here we go. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Your emails to me, you've been emailing me for a while. We've been conversing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember when that started.
I think I know when it started. I think
when did that start?
It started right kind of at the outset of the pandemic.
Okay.
Because you did an episode about how dojos were going to survive the pandemic and this sort of thing. And I said, hey, you got to check out Shihan Kendall's dojo in Salisbury, because as soon as the thing hit, they were on the ball getting online material up and that sort of thing. And it sort of progressed from there.
Yeah, they've been crushing it. And it's funny because you made that intro or that kind of recommendation, and then somebody actually made me an introduction to Shihan Kendall, who has not been on the show. Well, we'll make it happen eventually.
Yeah,
but he's super busy.
Yes, he is.
But I've had the chance to get acquainted with him and his school and all the great things that they're doing over there. And when I had a call with him and we were chatting about some stuff, and I said, "Yeah, I'm hearing great things about you." And he's like, Really? Who's talking about us? And so I mentioned your name, and he's like, that name's familiar, but it doesn't sound like he's as aware of you, which is a shame.
Oh no,
So
he knows who I am.
okay, then I somehow screwed up in saying it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, because I've been teaching at his school for a number of
Oh,
years, so
then I
he knows
definitely
who I
dropped the
am.
ball there. I definitely dropped the ball there in whatever I said, or maybe you know what, now because we're going back a year, so forgive my
Yes.
memory.
No, it's
But
okay.
you know what it might have been. As I'm saying this, I think you weren't the only one that made that suggestion off that episode.
That would not surprise me.
That's what it was. Okay, so my apologies for seeming like a moron here.
No. It's all good. But I know because I talked to him at some point after, and because I let him know, I said, "Look, I want you to know, I put your name in for this podcast because, I think you're doing such good things, and I think they'd be interested in talking to you." He's like, "Okay, cool." And then I followed up with him sometime later. I'm like, did you ever get in touch with this guy? Did he ever reach out? And he said, funny enough, someone else made that connection.
Yeah.
I think it was Craig Wareham who
It was. I don't generally bring up names.
Yeah.
I try to let other people bring up the names. Yeah, but
yeah,
Craig connected us, and it's been good.
Yeah, no, that's
good.
good.
He's a great guy.
It's like we've got enough overlapping circles to sort of
We do, and that's one of the fun things about martial arts, right? Is that those circles don't hit hard lines at state boundaries or anything. So you've got a circle of even if it's 300 miles, and then somebody 50 miles away has a circle 300 miles. So you extend that across the United States and across the country, really. Across the globe, and you start to see that. It's rare that you're more than 2 or 3 degrees separated from any other martial artist.
Right.
Which blows my mind.
Yeah, it's a really interesting community that way. It doesn't take long to find those connections.
No, and that's one of the fun things about the show is that we'll bring people on, and we've had it a couple times. Now that we've had so many people on, you're going to be episode like 590 or something.
Yeah.
As we've had so many people on, we have people on who don't realize that people that they're first degree connected to were on. They say, "Oh, so and so," or "I learned from so and so." I'm like, "Oh, they were on the show. It was episode like 40," and they're like, "Wow."
Right.
The world just gets a little smaller, and I don't know. I think that's fun, but I also think it's beneficial because it's harder to be a jerk.
Yep.
When you feel like you're connected to people, right? Like it's the YouTube effect. The worst comments in the world are on YouTube.
Yeah.
Although it's not now. It seems like it's moved a little bit. But for the longest time, you would just see people being anonymous and just saying these terrible things. And
right.
now, as a community, when we realize that, hey, we've got more in common than we do that divides us.
Absolutely.
A little bit less likely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on with you? What are you up to with teaching and training and all that stuff?
So I'm teaching. Well, I'll backtrack a little bit. Sort of at the outset of the pandemic, when we all sort of had to make adjustments, my schedule really went to teaching about 4 classes a week. And so most of those were outdoors. Actually, all of them were outdoors when we started, and just trying to sort of keep something going for my students, and doing whatever we could. And then as the weather started getting colder and outdoor training wasn't quite as much of an option as
the challenges of New England
had been in the summer, I put a thing out to my students and said, look, I don't know how many classes you're interested in. I don't know who's going to, hang in there for in-person stuff when we went indoors. And so had a lot of back and forth and surveying the population, trying to figure out what to do. And come November, I went from teaching 4 classes a week to teaching 17. And it just exploded.
Can you talk about that transition? Because that's weird. Let's call it weird. That's weird.
Yeah, it was weird. So, it's funny over the summer, I think because so many of people's other activities were shut down, and they couldn't go participate in some of the things that they would have otherwise. Many of my students really devoted themselves to Tai Chi because it was what they could keep doing and stay active and stay part of the community.
Right on.
And so I had people that had been only taking 1 class a week before the pandemic, suddenly were taking, all 4 of the classes I was offering. And it became clear that people were hungry for more. When we went indoors, of course, we had to limit the class size pretty severely. And so I couldn't have the kind of numbers that I was getting when I was teaching in the parks. And so I said, all right, I'm going to have to offer, several classes a week so that everyone gets their chance, and make sure, that we've got the numbers and everyone can get to the class they want to get to. And so it really just kind of exploded. And now, some of those people that went from one class to 4 classes, now I'm seeing them, for 8 classes a week. And other people, just continued to pick up new classes. And I gained new students because, like I said, other stuff was shut down. People didn't know how to deal, and they needed something. So we really opened the schedule up, and we're getting a lot of people coming in multiple times a week and really digging into training. I started teaching 3 Zoom classes a week so that the people who weren't able to come indoors, still had an option to train. And people have really taken to it and been very dedicated. I've been really lucky that way.
What you're talking about, what you've experienced is pretty much what I predicted back in March of 2020. If you can stick around, if you can grind this out as other things fall away, as unfortunately other schools don't do what they needed to do, they're going to close. There are going to be fewer things for people to do, fewer martial arts choices. And those that want to stay involved or want to do something are going to find the options that are left. And that's exactly what you're talking about here, from a bunch to 4 to 17.
Right.
And you're not alone. I mean, I hear from schools, every week that are going through this, and wow, we're doing better than we were.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. Now, teaching in the park, what is it? Here's a hard left. What is it about Tai Chi in the park? Why is Tai Chi always the style that's taught at a park? Right? I think if we imagine somebody teaching Tai Chi, most of us probably don't even imagine it being taught inside, because there's this cliche of it being outdoors. Why is that?
I think there's probably a couple reasons for it. I think that's very much the norm in China. There's a lot of tradition in China around people getting up and going to the park early in the morning for Tai Chi and for other activities. And there's also this culture in China of getting out of work, and instead of going home and doing more work or sitting in front of the TV or whatever, people would go back out to the park and do whatever activity they're involved in. And so I think it's not just Tai Chi. I think it's a lot of Chinese martial arts are taught in the park in China. And so that tradition has managed to carry over somewhat. I also think Tai Chi is still kind of a funny little niche market. And there are people who are interested in Tai Chi that don't want to be in a martial arts dojo, that don't want to feel that kind of environment for whatever reason. Much like my own practice now, I rent a studio at an hourly rate. And so I don't have a dedicated space just for Tai Chi. I'm teaching at the dojo in Salisbury where Shihan Kendall is. I'm renting another studio space where I teach, and I've taught in yoga studios, and I've taught other places. And I think outdoors just kind of lends itself to, the overhead's really low, and we can get a fair amount of students out there. And it's just nice to be able to practice that outside. If you're not doing a lot of the kind of sparring and contact work that happens inside sort of a traditional martial arts dojo, and you're not worried about having mats and throwing people down, Tai Chi sort of lends itself that way.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that we all have that kind of, maybe I'm putting words in other people's mouths, but whenever I see Tai Chi in a movie, it's always outside in a park. But you said something that I want to explore, that Tai Chi is a niche or a niche. People call it different things. I don't know that there's actually a right pronunciation. So anybody listening who's getting their hackles up over one pronunciation over the other, just let it go.
Right.
Is it really, or is it that is our perception here in the West? Because my understanding is that globally it's got quite a bit of participation.
I think you're right. I think it does have quite a bit of participation throughout the globe, and it's not like it's such a small niche or niche here, but it does sort of resist some categorization and also fall into multiple categories. And so you get kind of a funny cross section of people in Tai Chi. You get the people that are interested in the martial Tai Chi and really want to kind of explore how it works in a combat or self-defense type system. And you get people that are really only interested in the health side of things and might come from more of like a yoga approach, and be interested in it that way. And so you get kind of it's a funny art to work in that way. I think more people would really enjoy it if they would try it. But I do think there's still a little bit of culture around seeing it as something kind of on the fringe. Um, it went through a phase of being sort of very like a new age practice. And so a lot of people kind of turned away from it then. Um, but I think it's mostly around kind of a lack of understanding and knowledge about what the art really is, and what the real benefits for it are. And I think because it sort of covers a wide umbrella of benefits and what it offers, if you only see one side of that and you're not interested in that, then you sort of push the whole thing aside rather than saying, well, but this other aspect to it would actually be really good for me.
No, we're talking about the difference in perception versus reality, and there's some truth to the general perception of what Tai Chi is versus what it really is. I've been fortunate enough to have a little bit of experience with some amazing high level. You referred to them in the notes you sent over, martial Tai Chi practitioners.
Mm.
So I think I've got a pretty good understanding of what it is, or at least can be. But I would imagine that many of your students at some point had to have a transitional mental shift from what they thought it was to what it is as they become students. Is that happening before they reach out to you with inquiries or during your initial conversations, or does that not happen until they actually start training?
I think all three of those.
Okay.
It really depends. We as Great Bay Tai Chi, we sort of separate uh, our short form and our long form programs. We call our short form program Tai Chi for Good Health, and is really marketed for those people who are really interested in the health side of things and don't want to get too deep into the martial side.
Mm-hmm.
And then our long form program includes all of the martial practices, right? So we get into push hands and we practice applications and that sort of thing. Tai Chi for Good Health is always the bigger program, right? That's why more people come to Tai Chi, because that's what sort of introduces them to it. But we were talking before about what happened over the summer, where people that were taking one class were suddenly taking four, were suddenly taking eight, right? Well, it was a lot of those people that came to short form, to the Tai Chi for Good Health side, and developed an interest during those classes and said, okay, I know what this is now. I want to go deeper. And that's the way we always explain it. The long form, the martial program, is a deeper level study into the art. And so people that were taking just the short form suddenly were taking short form and long form and getting a better understanding of what it was all about. So
Interesting.
I think in a lot of ways, it's become kind of this backdoor entry into martial arts, where people that you would never expect to take a kung fu class or a karate class, they start in this good health Tai Chi program and suddenly find themselves doing much more martial practice. It's really interesting to see that develop.
That makes a lot of sense. The people who end up starting with short form, going long form, are they less interested in short form after they've spent more time in that more martial program?
Sometimes I think it's very common that the evolution will start with them being really interested in the short form, trying the long form, getting a better understanding, and sort of letting their short form fall off a little bit while they really dig deep into the long form. And then often sort of come back to re-emphasizing the short form, just as an additional practice, as something that we call them short form and long form because the short form takes much less time, right? From start to finish, it's only
Sure.
5 minutes to do the whole thing. Whereas if you're doing long form, you're talking more about 20 to 30 minutes maybe. And so short form is a great thing to have in your repertoire where I've got 5 minutes, I'm really stressed out, I need to find a way to relax. I'm going to, take those 5 minutes to do my short form, rather than think about, okay, I'm going to go all the way into the long form. And for me, it's a difference in mentality, right? When I'm doing the short form, it's much more of kind of a meditation feel to it. And when I'm doing the long form, it's much more often more of a martial feel.
That makes sense. Yeah. Uh, How did Tai Chi start for you? Was that your first art or something else, and you shifted? What's the story? What's the history?
So when I was young, my first art was Kempo. And so this was when I think I started right around when I was 12, maybe, yeah, like 12, maybe 11. And I did that kind of throughout my junior high and high school years. And I loved it. I did it, I was very serious about it for a long time. And then when I went to college, it kind of fell off for me. I had originally ambitions of finding a place to train while I was in college, but the college lifestyle and schedule sort of didn't allow for that.
You're not alone.
And so
Plenty of others.
that was when that kind of dropped off for me, but it was still always kind of a part of my mentality, and I had dreams of keeping it up in some fashion. And then got out of school, got a job, started all of that, and was always sort of aware and interested in Tai Chi, sort of in the background somewhere. Didn't have a whole lot of depth of knowledge about the martial side of it, but I kind of knew there was something there that was interesting. And so right around 2007, my wife and I decided that we were interested in finding an activity that we could do together. We had always, I'm a musician in the other side of my professional life, and so I was always heavily invested in music. She was already heavily invested in dance, and those were kind of our separate things. And we said, we could really use something to do together. And we ended up deciding Tai Chi was the thing to do. So we checked out a bunch of studios, and I had enough knowledge and background to know what I didn't want. That I didn't want that just the shallow level, new agey kind of feel. I wanted something with a little more of the martial tradition in it. So we were able to be picky about where we ended up, and found a great place right in the town that we lived in. We were very lucky, and started doing that together. And once we got going, that was kind of it for me. I was hooked right away, and have stayed with it ever since. She stopped after she was pregnant, and hasn't had the chance to go back yet, but does sometimes say, she's interested in restarting at some point. Uh, but that's how it started. That's how we got it going.
What hooked you as a former, however we want to delineate styles here? We can talk external, internal, hard, soft, whatever. To me, the lines are pretty blurry.
Yeah,
But I think we can agree Tai Chi is typically quite different from the way Kempo is taught.
absolutely. Yeah.
So if we at least acknowledge the differences, if Kempo is something that you're really into and passionate about for a while, the discrepancy between the two, clearly there was something about what was different that also spoke to you. So what was that?
I think it was kind of the whole package for me. I knew when I was getting ready to go back to training and was kind of looking at Tai Chi, I knew I didn't want to do Kempo again. I felt like I had kind of got what I really needed from Kempo. I certainly could have gone back in and gone further. That's not to say I'm, a very high level Kempo practitioner. I'm not by any means. But I sort of felt like that was the right thing for me at that time of my life. And now, when I had, finished school and was kind of moving into a different phase of life, I knew I needed something different. And, just kind of did some research and said, well, I'm going to check this Tai Chi thing out and see what it really is. And so the fact that the teacher we found was able to address the martial side of the practice, which appealed to that Kempoist in me, and also had the softer meditation style. It really brought it all together. And so I think, for me, it was a whole experience that really drew me into it.
Okay. And the question that I generally ask folks who cross train or make a big shift, how did your Kempo background positively and negatively impact your transition into Tai Chi?
So for the positive side, Kempo definitely gave me a better understanding of what was going on inside the movements. You know, the way Tai Chi is trained, or any internal quote unquote style is trained, really starts from movement first and doesn't move into technique and that sort of thing until later. So those movements can feel really, really abstract when you're learning them. But having the Kempo in my background and sort of having a fundamental understanding of how that might relate to working with another person gave me more insight into how those postures were going to function. And so I just had a little more context for what the movements of the form were trying to teach me. But on the other side, as you referred to already, Kempo is decidedly on the external or hard style side. And letting go of a lot of that is really, really hard when you make the transition to a softer style. When you've built up all that power training and, you get pretty good at using your muscles and being forceful with stuff. Tai Chi takes a very, very different approach. And so just getting over that and kind of releasing all that stored up tension takes a while. It did for me anyway. It took a while for me to get over.
Mm, okay. And so what about now? As you're practicing Tai Chi, teaching Tai Chi, do your Kempo roots show up from time to time?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so it's interesting, we talked about Shihan Kendall's dojo where I teach several of my classes, and that's a Kempo school. And so those teachers and those students and my own kids attend that school. And so I'm familiar with at least the fundamentals of what goes on and the first several techniques that are taught. We even did some seminars with Shihan Kendall's group where we would take Kempo techniques and sort of Tai Chi-ize them, soften them up, and see, what's another way to approach this technique, and how would Tai Chi deal with this problem, in comparison to how Kempo would deal with this problem. And I really enjoy that crossover of, let's see how Kempo would play this game. Let's see how Tai Chi would play this game. Because sometimes you're working with a person who's got a particular technique that just doesn't work for them, right? The body type isn't right, or they haven't developed some aspect that would be really helpful. And you take a different approach, and suddenly they can find a way to make that technique work. And I think having that contrast of Tai Chi and Kempo working together is really powerful for a lot of people. And so I really like it when we can do those crossover type activities.
Nice. Nice. I really enjoy that crossover, that cross training, that relating one style back to another. I think there's something not only really fun about it, but I think there's something enlightening. Seems a little bit too blunt of a word, but I'm sure you've experienced it personally, and probably also as an instructor, where looking at a concept in a slightly different way, or maybe in this case, a more dramatic way, can really open it up for someone, have them wrap their mind, oh, that's what it means. That's what we're trying to do with this or that. That's how I'm supposed to move here. And I think that can be really fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree.
Okay. So talk about your own, I guess, personal practice through this. If you're teaching this many classes, you're probably, I'm going to guess, shifting some of what you're teaching into what you want to work on at least part of the time, so you can get your own practice in. But are you ever exploring the, let's at least accept the dichotomy here for, even though I don't think either of us agree with it, just for the purposes of the discussion, it's a little bit easier to explain when, nuance isn't available. Uh, are you practicing things that are non-Tai Chi? There we go. I think we did it without.
Yeah. So I think, there's a few pieces to that question. And so one is the advantage now of having so many students that have really invested themselves in coming to, several classes a week, and I'm seeing, 3 or 4 times throughout the course of a week, means we've been able to raise our level pretty significantly over the past several months. And so we've been able to really dive into some interesting concepts within the form, and those little nuances and the transitions that we kind of never really had the chance to when people were only attending class once, maybe twice a week. You just don't get enough time in to really explore the depths of what the practice has to offer. And so the fact that we've got more students now who are investing so much time and can do that has been really great for me as an instructor. And the students are able to ask more interesting questions now, and we can have better conversations around a lot of that. And so my personal practice on that side of it really relates to that. And it's helping make me a better teacher and giving me better ideas and better ways to explain a lot of the concepts that we explore in the scope of a class. Mm-hmm. So the other piece to your question about, am I practicing things that aren't Tai Chi? There are 2 other arts that I teach and practice now. They're a little more esoteric in some ways than Tai Chi. One is called Xingyi, and the other is called Bagua. And they're all in that kind of soft internal style of Chinese martial arts. So they're all related in some way, but they're all practiced really differently. And the Xingyi in particular is a lot of fun for me to play with because I think of it as being about halfway between Tai Chi and Kempo. It definitely has a harder look to it, even though it uses a lot of the Tai Chi body mechanics. And the Bagua is another kind of really interesting practice, and its hallmark is being practiced in a circle. All the forms, so to speak, are done in a circle. And so those are really the focus of my non-Tai Chi practice, even though they're still kind of tied into that because they come from that same soft style Chinese root.
Oh, interesting. Let's start here. If someone is familiar with Tai Chi, at least in concept, and I'm going to suspect that most of the folks listening are, why are you going to do one of these other 2 or all 3? What does one provide to you that Tai Chi does not?
I think they're different approaches. Again, sort of like what we talked about with Tai Chi and Kempo, right? Kempo will solve this problem this way. Tai Chi will solve this problem this other way. And Bagua and Xingyi are kind of other ways to explore that. So we think about, we've got the Tai Chi diagram, that classic yin-yang symbol with the white and the black swirl. And so when we talk about Chinese philosophy and anything like that, people will use that symbol as a way to sort of help them define those things, right? So if you take soft style martial arts and impose that onto the symbol, right? Tai Chi is the yin side, the black swirl, right? The soft side. Xingyi is the harder side of that, right? Still under the umbrella of soft style or internal arts, but it's definitely harder than Tai Chi is. And Bagua kind of becomes the line in between, right? So again, you can take those same problems that you might talk about as a Kempo will solve this way, Tai Chi will solve this way, and Bagua and Xingyi have different answers to how they work. And so it adds to everything, right? And eventually my Bagua has become infused into my Tai Chi, and my Tai Chi is infused into my Xingyi, and it becomes a really interesting exploration that way.
Would it be fair to compare the 3 in the way that someone might compare 3 different styles of karate? Say like Uechi-ryu and Goju and Shotokan.
I think I don't have enough experience within those styles to really define them that way. But my understanding is there'll be a lot of curriculum overlap in the kind of styles you just mentioned, right? Sometimes you'll see the same form, even if it's in a slightly different interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas between Tai Chi, Bagua, and Xingyi, that's not really the case. The Tai Chi form is a Tai Chi form, and Xingyi is much less focused on form. It's a lot of line drills, and has a lot more sort of technique at the front of the curriculum. And Bagua, we sort of talked about, has this funny circle walking practice. And so they all give you kind of this different aspect. I would say, when you talk about karate styles, sometimes you'll hear people talk about, well, this one really emphasizes, the technical martial side, and this one really emphasizes the flow side, something like that. And so you could make that comparison, especially with Xingyi and Tai Chi, right? The Xingyi is sort of very straightforward, very martial, um, works a little bit earlier on power training, whereas Tai Chi would be more of sort of the soft, flowing side, and waits on its power training until much later.
All right. All right. Now, when I was bringing up this dichotomy, this hard soft, you chuckled because I'm sure you've heard this before, and I think even in some of the notes that you sent over, this was something that you wanted to get into. This idea that it's not as black and white, cut and dry as so many practitioners, and honestly, it tends to be the quote unquote hard style practitioners who draw that line in between. How did we get there? What is why it, well, first off, if I'm speaking accurately,
Yeah.
why is the perception of these these three styles that you're talking about, why is their perception that they are soft and exclusively soft or internal from a large portion of the martial arts world?
So I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think in China, at some point, and I won't know exactly when, so I can't pin down a time frame on this, but there was kind of a movement from the Chinese government to classify Chinese martial arts into those categories and say, well, this is hard style and this is soft style. And sometimes you'll hear people use the terms Shaolin, as in the Shaolin Temple, and they'll talk about Wudang, as in the Wudang Mountains. And the hard style arts became associated with Shaolin and Buddhism, and the quote unquote soft style arts became associated with Wudang and Taoism. And whether or not those delineations were truly accurate, people sort of took them and ran. And so I think in a lot of ways, the hard styles became harder and the soft styles became softer.
Okay.
The other piece, and I have kind of this working theory about this that I kind of stole from Dr. Yang, who was on your show not that long ago.
Yeah.
And in one of his lectures, he talks about how the curriculum between a soft style art and a hard style art are really just backwards from each other. They work in opposite directions, where a hard style art will start off with technique and power training, and then at the end of the curriculum, they do body mechanics. And in a soft style art, it's the reverse. We start off with body mechanics and then do the power training and the technical stuff a little bit later. And so I think what happened was, in both styles, whether you're talking about a Chinese style or a Japanese style, you had people that maybe came from this country and went to China, went to Japan, trained, and came back and brought some of these arts with them. And I think oftentimes what happened was you would get people who would train in a hard style art and reach a certain level, but maybe never got the body mechanics side of it and got all that power training and all that technique and brought it back. And whether or not they knew they didn't quite have the complete art or not, started teaching it, and that became the complete art. And then the same thing happens with the soft style stuff. And I think especially with Tai Chi, which is why now you sort of see less martial Tai Chi out there,
Yeah.
because you get these people that did all this great body mechanic work, but never really got the martial side of it. And so when they came back, that's what they had to teach.
Sure.
And so I think there was loss on both sides, but I think it's most obvious on the Tai Chi side, where you had people that just never got this martial side to it, and maybe they didn't even know that it was supposed to be there, because it's at the end of the curriculum.
Right. Right. When you talk about the martial side of Tai Chi, we may have some folks listening who have no idea what we're talking about. So could you explain that to them?
So through the method we were just talking about, Tai Chi really became known as a health practice, right? Where people came from these other countries or trained under someone and got this beautiful health art, but never were taught or didn't understand that Tai Chi was originally conceived as a martial art, right? And depending on who you ask, you'll get different stories about what the actual origin of the thing is. But the best that we've been able to trace it, it goes back to the Chen family village in China. And originally it was just called Chen style boxing, right? It was the Chen family's martial art. And then eventually there was this guy named Yang Luchan who studied with the Chens. And when he went to Beijing, he became well known as a martial artist. And eventually that became Tai Chi. And the full name for Tai Chi is Taichi Chuan, right? Chuan is fist and indicates that it's a martial art. But then, as we were talking about, you had these people that were trained and didn't get the martial side of it, and Tai Chi got distilled down into a practice known for its health benefits. And it's because of all those body mechanics that Tai Chi works on at the outset. It focuses much more on alignment and coordination rather than martial technique. And so that's what a lot of people got. But Tai Chi was originally conceived and intended to be a martial style. That's what it was designed for.
It's interesting that the loss of, or the removal, absence, absence is the best word. The absence of that martial aspect seems to correlate with the absence of that third piece of the name, the fist.
Right.
Right. It's almost like, okay, we're gonna hack off this part of the name, we're gonna hack off this part of the curriculum, and just kind of run with it.
And some of that may be intentional, right? Some people may realize that they're only teaching a health-based art and not teaching the martial side, and say, well, we're not really teaching Tai Chi Chuan, we're teaching Tai Chi, right?
Yeah. I've shared this story once or twice on the show, but it's been a while, so I'll share it again because we have new listeners all the time. My most significant Tai Chi experience with someone who understood the complete art, or from my perspective, the complete art, someone who had the martial aspect, came to a Taekwondo class. And it was someone that I knew. We had a lot of people that we knew in common, and he knew that I had trained in a bunch of stuff and was here at this Taekwondo school. So I became his dummy for the class, for this hour-long session that he put on. And, most of the people there were kind of into it. A few people were like, eh. And I was loving it because I have never been beat up so completely and so gently in an overwhelming way. If you've never experienced it, it is really hard to describe.
Yeah.
I would punch at this man who, he had a few inches on me, but I'm quite sure I outweighed him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a large guy. He was thin. And I would punch him as we got up to pretty darn close to as hard as I could. And he would just kind of go, meh, meh, just these very subtle movements that I did not even feel.
Right.
And I was gone. I was on the floor, and the only contact I felt was with the floor.
Yeah.
And there were some things I said, can you do that again, please? I'm trying to figure out what's going on, because was just so subtle. It's the best word I can use. Can you unpack any of that from what I'm describing for not just the listeners, but for me?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It's very, very hard to describe if you don't have that kind of experience and get a feel for what that's like. But when you're working with a high level Tai Chi person, because we practice those very, very refined body mechanics, and there's this saying in Tai Chi about 4 ounces deflects 10,000 pounds. And so you're finding this alignment inside your body where it doesn't require muscular force to upset someone's balance or divert that strike that you're throwing at them. And then they use body positioning to take you further off of your route and really upset your balance and have you on the floor or tied up in some joint lock. And it's very, very hard to feel what's happening. And a lot of that is done through this practice in Tai Chi that we call push hands, where, usually when people think of Tai Chi, they think about the slow moving form out in the park, right? But Tai Chi also has these partner exercises, and push hands is part of that, where they're still done slowly and they're done with very light contact. And we really work on feeling how and where someone is moving um, at that really subtle level that you were trying to describe. And so it comes from as soon as you make contact with a person, you feel where they're going, you feel where the next strike is going to be from, and you just use your body position and really gently kind of push that off the line and upset their balance. And suddenly that person is feeling exactly what you experienced, that sort of overwhelmed, I'm on the ground, I don't know how I got here. And it's a really interesting experience to have. The
It
first time
is.
you have it, there's nothing quite like it. And my teacher, I got to be the demonstration dummy for many of those classes, and so I'm very familiar with that feeling.
I've never had more fun getting beat up.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting how that works because you don't actually end up hurt unless they're
No,
really trying to
not
hurt
even a
you,
little.
right? But yeah, suddenly you're just not at all where you expected to be.
Yeah, it's some definitely some dissonance between the expectation and the result, and I find
Right.
it fascinating. How long does that sort of competency in Tai Chi take? Is that like black belt equivalent in say a Kempo or a karate or Taekwondo?
Um, the ranking thing is really hard for me. We don't give rank in our school. There are
Sure.
schools that do offer rank in Tai Chi. My teacher, Paul Mahoney, he really kind of rejected that. And I don't offer rank for any of my students because of the way the curriculum is so circular. Um, it kind of doesn't fit well into that kind of categorization. But I think it takes a while. Depending on the person and how much time they train and what their experience is. We talked about how I came from Kempo, I came from a hard style art, and so it took me a long time to let go of a lot of that stuff and really learn to listen and feel at that subtle level.
Yeah.
Some people find it easier. Women tend to find it a little easier because they're not quite so ingrained all the time in that forcefulness that a lot of us men are.
Yep.
Uh, so yeah, it does. It takes a while, and it's so different from any other practice that I've been exposed to. Um, that it's a matter of how much time you're willing to spend really practicing. And the Chinese have this saying about invest in loss, and be prepared to be bad at it for a long time before you can start to figure it out.
That's been a recurring theme on quite a few episodes of the show over the last few months.
Yeah.
This idea that so many of us today aren't willing to step in and just plain old suck at something for a while. So we can get past that part to the part where we're kind of not sucky.
Right, right. And I think part of that is a cultural thing. I think our culture is very much interested in things I can do well very quickly. Um, and very often I'll tell my beginners classes that Tai Chi is kind of the great equalizer, right? It doesn't really matter what you have in your background. If it's other martial arts, if it's yoga, if it's nothing, you're all going to be terrible at this when we start out. And they learn very quickly that's true. But given, a little bit of time and some effort and some thoughtful practice, it gets better and you start to find the benefits in that practice.
Okay. Now, in the classes that you're teaching, are they exclusively Tai Chi, or are you bringing in Bagua and Xingyi into the same classes? Do you teach those as separate classes? Like how does that all reconcile?
Right now, I teach the Bagua and the Xingyi separately. I have my primary classes are the Tai Chi short form, the Tai Chi long form, and now twice a week I'm offering what we call Wudang Kung Fu, which is really where we're teaching the Bagua and the Xingyi. That the Wudang Kung Fu, Tai Chi also kind of falls under that umbrella. And so eventually, once the students have a little bit more grounding in the Bagua and the Xingyi, the Tai Chi will be a little more tied into that. I'm also kind of looking forward to, as we get more people vaccinated and we're able to start doing some contact work again and that sort of thing, as we delve a little more into application work, which has kind of fallen behind us during the pandemic. I think as we explore the applications, there'll be a lot more crossover between the Tai Chi and the Bagua and the Xingyi, and that way people can kind of get a feel for, like we were talking about, how those different arts solve those different problems.
Sure. That makes sense. So what else? We've talked about a bunch of different stuff, but I feel like I've kind of had you on the spot quite a bit on what you practice more so than you, but I also get the sense that you're not a big fan talking about you. So maybe that was a good decision.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Here's a question I don't ask often anymore. This is a little bit of a throwback. Personal challenges. When we go through life with martial arts, we have a toolkit that we can refer to. Is there any personal experience you're willing to share that might have gone a different way had you not been a martial artist?
Yeah, so the biggest one that comes to mind, we talked a little bit about when I started Tai Chi, it was with my wife, because we wanted something that we could do together. And so when we finally really got into it, it was about 2008. And I mentioned that she stopped training when she got pregnant. And the big driving force behind that was because she was pregnant with triplets.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, of course, has its own challenges to it. And so I feel really fortunate that we found Tai Chi at that time, because that really kind of became my anchor through a lot of the stuff we went through. And so even once the three kids were born, my wife and I said to each other that, our schedule at home is going to be really crazy. We both are going to need something to hang on to that's going to get us out of the house and give us some personal time and something to practice and that sort of thing. So for her, that was her dance class that she was able to go to. And we sort of treated that as sacred and said, we're not going to mess with that. That's your time. You get to go do that. And for me, it was Tai Chi. And so I just continued my training and let the Tai Chi be my anchor and my extra community once the kids were born. And it really helped sustain me through all the stuff that came into, having a wife who was pregnant with triplets and then gave birth to triplets and having three infants in the house at once and all of that.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I wonder how many people would choose to get pregnant if they said, you're going to get pregnant, but you're going to have three. I feel like that number would go down at least a little bit.
Yeah, if they're smart.
Oh, I love it. Talk more about what you've got going on. How, if people want to reach you, resources that you're providing. You know, I got the sense that as things went online, not only was Shihan Kendall embracing it, but I got the sense that you also were. So, you know, are there ways that people from afar might connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm teaching 3 Zoom classes a week. 2 of them are in the Tai Chi short form, and 1 of them is in the long form. So we try to give enough variety there for the people that are interested in that. And then I also teach a Tai Chi for beginners course several times a year, and we made the decision to make that available in video format. And so there's a site called Teachable where you can sign up and take these various courses. And so if people were interested, they could go to greatbaytaichi.teachable.com, and they'll find a way to access a video course there that takes them through my typical 8-week Tai Chi for beginners course, and starts off as if you've got no Tai Chi, no martial arts, no experience at all, and takes them through the first part of the Yang style short form, so that they get a good fundamental understanding of what Tai Chi is and what the beginning of the form is like and how it moves and that sort of thing. So we have that available. I also have a Patreon site, which is patreon.com/Great Bay Tai Chi. And that's another space where I put up some instructional videos, and I sort of write little articles and blog type entries there, book reviews, to give people another resource and way to practice at distance.
Cool. I love it. And folks, if you're listening, you know, we've got these links. We're going to make sure that those are on the show notes at whistlekickmartialartsradio.com, just in case you skip the intro and outro and you don't know that I say these things. I'm throwing them here in the conversation. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to get to? Anything that you wanted to unpack?
No, I don't think so. I think we had a good conversation around
I agree.
where Tai Chi falls kind of in that broader spectrum of martial arts. And, you know, I think it's a really valuable thing for people that are in a harder style or external type art, to give you another approach. And I think the reverse is also true, right? People that are just on the Tai Chi for good health side and have only explored it as a health practice, getting some martial arts experience, whether or not it strictly fits that category of Tai Chi, just deepens your level of understanding of what those arts are.
I completely agree. I've said for a long time that if you take a look at what you're good at, you can also kind of turn around and see the things that you are not so good at. And by addressing those things, you have the most overall improvement. For a lot of us, quote unquote, hard stylists, adding some Tai Chi, some Bagua, some Jingyi in to our practice, even temporarily, might make some light bulbs go off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rock on. All right. Well, I appreciate you being here, and you know how this next part goes. What are your final words to the folks listening?
I think my final words would be exactly what we just said. And, you know, if you're in a hard style art and, you know, if you're reaching one of those training plateaus, getting a different perspective is really to your benefit. So I definitely encourage people, you know, when you're getting to those upper levels of those arts, you know, start exploring something different, something softer, to be a complement to what you're already doing. And I think the Tai Chi people, it goes the same way. You know, we need to be willing to explore the martial side of the practice so that we understand why Tai Chi moves the way it does, and it just makes everybody better overall, because we're all on that same journey somewhere.
I thought that was a great conversation. I always come away from my conversations with people who engage in martial arts that I've not spent much time doing, wanting to spend more time training in those arts. And Shifu Himmel and I have kept talking, and you know what? That might happen in the near future. So I'm kind of pumped about that. Thanks for coming on the show, sir. Thanks for stepping up, and we'll keep talking. I'm looking forward to it. To those of you listening, hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting us. Thanks for checking out the show, and I hope that you get a lot of value out of what we do. And if you do, You know what to do. I said it in the intro, but I'll hit the highlights again. Buy something, Patreon, tell other people. That's really the heart of it. That's how we make our money. So if you like what we do, help us make sure that we're around. If you've got guest suggestions, feedback, other stuff like that, let me know. Jeremy at whistlekick.com. Don't forget, we've got a Facebook group, Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio Behind the Scenes. You can go deeper on this or the other episodes at whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. And all of our social media is pretty straightforward at whistlekick. That's it. Until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.